Hey, Eric.
Hey, Mickey.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you?
I'm pretty good.
Good.
I thought I had a great blog item I just posted today, but it turned out Chuck Todd of Hotline had said exactly the same thing 3 months ago.
That's really sad.
But he was right too soon.
As my 8-year-old would say, that's really sad.
I'm pretty sad about it. But anyway, good to have you on Blogging Heads. Is this your first appearance?
I'm a virgin blogging header.
We like them better that way. Get tired of the same old blogging head night after night. So I guess the first thing we're going to talk about is we're a little late on it, but there's still some juice in it, which is Clinton's interview on Fox with Chris Wallace, where he got really angry and accused Wallace of doing a right-wing hit job. And what did you think of that?
I don't have any problem with it at all. It's good politics. It's true.
Why was it good politics?
It's good politics because Democrats need to energize their base, and he's their most effective voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and plus, do you want Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid trying to do that, or do you want Bill Clinton doing that? He's still the best thing Democrats have going in the mind of the public, and he's still going to be the most effective person to do that. And Fox is a perfect stand-in. There's a better word for that, but it's a perfect foil for Bush and the Republicans, because Fox is sort of the focus point of all the frustration that liberals and moderates feel about how our politics just doesn't make any sense to them.
A couple points. I basically bought that argument. It was made first out of the box was Bill Kristol, bizarrely making that argument that Clinton's, he didn't just lose it, this served a purpose. The voters aren't going to get Clinton when they go to the polls, and they're never going to get Clinton again, at least at the presidential level.
Yeah, but
Bill Clinton.
Mickey, you want to keep this election about Bush. You don't want to keep it about the people they're actually voting for. So Clinton makes it about the Republicans versus Democrats, Clinton versus Bush. If they were voting on Joe Schmo versus their actual congressman, who they don't really know but seems like a nice guy, then the Democrats have a much harder job.
Good point. How about the argument that this is exactly the sort of it's good politics for the midterms. It's exactly the sort of thing that Hillary is incapable of doing. I could never see Hillary pulling off a tantrum like that and having it be effective. I thought Clinton was effective at least for the first 6 of the 10 minutes before he went off in a paranoid jag about Rupert Murdoch. But Hillary could never do that.
Footnote: Alterman disputes the nature of that jag being paranoid.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. But
Hillary's skills as a politician are not the kind of skills that show up in an interview like that. As Clinton said in that long profile of him by David Remnick, she's much better prepared for him. She knows, she's much better at sort of working through policy issues with him and working with her opponents. She's not good off the cuff at all. She doesn't have the sort of instincts that he has, and certainly not the theatrical instincts that he has. So, to the degree that this is a show, to the degree that this is like the part that the media focuses on, she doesn't look so good. But to the degree that, and I think this is more important, to the degree that the Clintons bombed with the grassroots, which is what happened in this at the very least, it's good for him. Right? Because people will be voting for Bill when they vote for Hillary.
Well, and people will forget that she voted for the war, which is why the Clintons have to seize on any chance they have to bond with the left, because they have this big debt to overcome, which is that she and I think he supported the war.
I agree. The anti-war vote, the anti-war vote was a little bit more than 50% at the time of the war. It's about 90% now. Although Hillary would probably side with those people in some way. But that vote is the vote that's up for grabs.
It was interesting that in the Times this morning, in her defense of Clinton's rant, she accused the administration of, which I do think was mostly effective. She accused the administration of losing focus on the war in Iraq. So even now, when she's bonding with the left, she's not for withdrawal. She's for a renewed focus on Iraq.
She said Iraq, not Afghanistan.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'll find it. But it's
that would be an odd thing for her to say.
I
mean, the problem with Hillary. Look, the problem with Hillary and the war is not that she voted for it. It's that she hasn't apologized for that vote. John Edwards is a much stronger candidate with the left for having apologized, even though he voted for it. So John Kerry would be if he weren't John Kerry. But Hillary is going to have to find a way to say the words, "I was wrong," the words that don't appear in George Packer's book. People need to hear that. The people who were vilified by your friend Andrew Sullivan and others for being right in the first place need to hear the people who were wrong say, "I was wrong." And unless Hillary can say that, she's not going to get the support of these people, and it's going to be a wide open nomination.
Well, she probably still thinks, as you said on your site, she was right to be wrong, and they were wrong to be right.
It doesn't matter what she thinks. And my guess is that she knows it doesn't matter what she thinks. But the fact that, it's so easy to do. It's, there was a story way back when where I had a big argument with Kerry in public at Al Franken's house, where I said, "Dude, blame it on Bush. He lied to you. Say I was lied to, and that's why I voted for it, and I regret trusting this man." I don't see what's so hard about that.
He's done that, hasn't he now, Kerry?
Kerry did it, yeah. But Hillary won't do it, and it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Here's the Hillary quote.
Yeah.
The administration has lost focus on winning the war on Iraq. Not even in Iraq, but on Iraq. And all Washington Republicans can focus on is winning elections here at home. So she doesn't say the war in Paris, she says the war in Iraq.
That's not the way to go for the constituency we're talking about.
I'm assuming, you seem to be assuming that the only way she can be president is by somehow sort of getting right with the Democratic left base.
I don't assume that. That would be too strong a statement. It depends on whether or not... Are we moving on to 2008 now?
No, we're not, because we still have to talk about Clinton's paranoia.
Oh, well. So we'll hold that thought.
We'll hold the Hillary thought?
Yeah.
Okay. Going to Clinton's paranoia, Bill Clinton's paranoia, it's interesting that, at the very lowest levels, like Netroots bloggers who are just, guys sitting around who are ranting partisans, and at the very highest levels, Bill Clinton, there's this intense paranoia about Fox. And I thought Clinton the problem with Clinton's rant wasn't that he shouldn't be paranoid about Fox. I think Fox is a Republican network. I think if you call up Roger Ailes and say, if Karl Rove calls up Roger Ailes and says, "I want to do this," I think Roger Ailes will probably do it. So I think the conspiratorial view has some merit. But Clinton's conspiracy was insane. It was somehow because Rupert Murdoch was supporting Hillary that they had to attack him. It made no sense at all.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense. That was badly done. That was off the cuff. I wouldn't focus too much on the details of this. Clinton, he made two broad points. One is that Fox is a right-wing network. The other one is that this comes on the heel of ABC's right-wing hit job, which I agree with both of the points, and I think those points resonate. As I said, there's enormous frustration with Fox as a symbol of everything that's wrong with the cravenness of the mainstream media and the power of the conservative media. They bleed into one another. And Clinton spoke to that. I also thought that he gets points for nailing Wallace on this sort of the cowardice of the question. Oh, I got an email that wants to know. Like Wallace wouldn't even take responsibility for asking the question.
Well, so what? He's still got a right to ask the question.
No, because he could have gotten an email that said Clinton is a cannibal.
No, right. But Chris Wallace has a right. It was a perfectly reasonable question to ask. It's a question I would have asked.
No, it's a reasonable question to ask. Although I wouldn't have asked it that way. But it's a reasonable question to ask. But it's not reasonable to ask it in such a way as I got an email and my emailers want to know without taking responsibility for it. Because if Wallace had been willing to take responsibility of it, Clinton could have nailed him. Did you know this, Chris? Did you know this? Did you know this? And said Walsh wouldn't have known it, and he would have looked like an idiot. But if it's just an emailer, well, then it's not really his problem. He doesn't have to take it. Oh, sorry, it's just...
Well, but that seems like a second-order point. I mean, Clinton did nail him anyway.
Not all that effectively, actually. He just kept saying, talk to Richard Clark, talk to Richard Clark.
Well, I thought he was effective, even though he also got some key details of the Somalia operation wrong. I mean, first he said nobody thought Al-Qaeda had anything to do with that. Well, it turns out Al-Qaeda did have something to do with it. Al-Qaeda showed the warlord IDs men how to trigger RPGs so that they blew our helicopters out of the sky.
Yeah, you see, I mean, I agree with you about that. On the details, I didn't think he was so great. I posted some of the details of what the Clinton administration had done on Altercation today and how the Bush administration dropped the ball. He could have made a much stronger case on that. Where he was effective was speaking to the frustration of this sort of phony narrative getting out there and becoming conventional wisdom, and the Democrats never fighting back, never having the means to fight back. So I think it was much more effective emotionally, and I happen to think the case is a good one. I don't think he made the case all that well.
Okay, well, I don't dispute that. I just think it sort of serves its usual function of showing up the weakness of Hillary. So I guess now we can transition to topic 2, which is our take on the 2008 race, not the 2006 race. What was I had a Hillary point that we had delayed. What was it?
Oh, about you inferred from my comments that I was saying that Hillary needs to shore herself up on the left in order to win. I don't remember if you meant the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me she'll never get the last 20% of the Democratic left vote, and she doesn't need it. Certainly doesn't need it to win the general election. So 20% of the population is pissed off at her about Iraq. Where are they going to go?
Yeah, no, we're not talking about the general election yet.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's even talk about the primary election.
Yeah, the primary election, supposedly, she has between 30 and 40% of the support sewn up. I don't actually understand that myself. I don't understand why that is. But if it's true, that means that the people who don't support her, and probably don't want to support her, it's not that they haven't made up their minds, it's that they have made up. They need to coalesce around one candidate.
Right.
So the question is who is in the best position to be that candidate?
Right.
So, as of today, of the people in the race, if you're asking me that question, I would say it's the strong favorite for that position is John Edwards.
Right.
But Gore could get in the race.
Right.
Conceivably, Obama could get in the race. And my smart friends in Washington saying that John Warner should be that person. Although I don't know why they say that, but they all seem to say that.
You mean Mark Warner, or this week they're probably saying John Warner. But well, first, your premise doesn't. I mean, why couldn't it come down to the primaries do their standard job of winnowing out all the anti-Hillarys until there's only one anti-Hillary left, and then everybody can coalesce around that person?
Well, no, I think it will happen, but it'll happen by New Hampshire. Because Hillary will have so much money after New Hampshire, and it's so expensive to run in all those markets, that she can bury anyone who's not got sort of the wind of the media behind them, the wind of the media momentum. It's a very strong argument for Edwards because the calendar was written for Edwards.
Well, so it doesn't have to happen now.
No, it's going to happen when Edwards wins Iowa. He might win Nevada, and then win South Carolina or North Carolina.
Right.
South Carolina.
Right.
And then he's won 3 primaries going into New Hampshire. So it's Edwards versus Hillary.
Right. That seems very plausible to me as you say it. But you've been enthusiastic on your blog about Barack Obama, and I guess I've read a couple of the recent pro-Obama pieces in the New York Magazine, and Jake Weisberg wrote one in Men's Vogue, and I still don't quite understand wherein lies the great. And you're a fan of Obama's. Wherein lies the greatness of Barack Obama? He seems like a perfectly good senator, and he has many appealing qualities. But why are we supposed to want him immediately to run for president?
Well, I didn't have any feelings about Obama until I was invited to a dinner with him and some other. It was me and like the head of some liberal organizations. It wasn't like a journalist dinner. It was sort of a strategy dinner that I happened to be invited in. I was on the wrong list. And number one, I felt this charismatic thing happening. Number two, I felt a real intelligence and a critical intelligence and a kind of no BS. I don't know what the rules of saying dirty words are.
We try to avoid them, but
yeah, I felt in the presence of a real person who I could have a beer with, quote unquote. No, who I could talk to without a filter.
Right.
And the third, so he's incredibly charismatic. He's authentically religious. He's incredibly intelligent. The black thing, I think, is probably a plus overall because people who aren't going to vote for a black man weren't going to vote for a Democrat either. So you don't really lose anyone there, and you thrill the media. You get the great American dream story going. And the thing about him not having really done anything is a plus because he's not a flip-flopper. You know, anybody who does anything will be turned into a flip-flop. And I think Jonathan Cohn wrote this piece, or maybe it's Jonathan Chait, that anyone with any kind of record is hopeless against Republicans because their campaign strategy is so dishonest in that regard.
Well, not if their record is my kind of record, which is you have a record of taming Democratic interest groups. I mean, the big selling point for Clinton when he ran was that, rightly or wrongly, maybe it was BS, but he had taken on the teachers' unions in Arkansas and gotten a provision in his bill that made it easier to fire teachers who did badly on competency exams.
Well, Democratic activists don't like Barack either. David Sirota didn't like him in the nation. Tom Hayden doesn't like him. He made a bad vote with the bankruptcy bill. He can say I've stood up. But the point is Mickey, that Clinton was 92, and they weren't that good at this thing. They're much better at this now. This flip-flop.
Well, but they wouldn't. I don't understand. How would they now have painted Clinton's opposition to the teachers' unions as a flip-flop?
No, but they would find positions that appear to be contradictory in Clinton's long record, and they would say you can't trust this man's character. So any record at all is a net negative in the contemporary campaigning culture.
I think you're too scared of Karl Rove and fail to appreciate the power of Sister Soldier moments.
Well, I thought John Kerry had. I didn't like John Kerry. I didn't get any good vibes from him at all as a person. But I thought he had an excellent record. I thought he had an unimpeachable record, and they just turned him to mush.
But he is much. Certain of us thought he was a loser from the get-go, and
yeah, I know you're famous for that. You thought he was going to withdraw from.
I had some rationalization that made me look good, like he should have withdrawn.
Yeah, but the point is that the things not to like about Kerry are that he's a self-important drip, not that he didn't have a strong, consistent record of fighting for what he believed in, which he does.
So just because they can destroy self-important drip doesn't mean they can destroy anybody, i.e., even Bill Clinton in '92, and doesn't mean they could destroy Obama if he did something other than the bankruptcy bill, which is not exactly a high valence issue. To show that he is not a traditional liberal, and in fact that's the reason he's so appealing is because he had one line in his speech to the convention. He had one minor Sister Soldier moment. I forget what it was. It was something about education and not wanting to lower standards.
Yeah, but he's a born-again Christian. The problem is not being liberal. The problem is looking down at giving people the impression that you're not one of them. And he's a born-again Christian who worked his way up from being, practically an orphan. So, and he speaks street, so to speak.
Well, here's a critique of him that I just thought of, which either makes it suspect or not. The problem I have with the guy, and the blackness sort of hurts him in this respect, is you don't have a handle on him. You don't sort of know where he comes from. We know what Bush is. He's this Texas guy who walks with this fake swagger, and you can sort of get, even if you don't like him, you sort of can put him in his pigeonhole. We know what Clinton is. He's like this liberal Bubba type. Obama, he's sort of unformed, and that sort of makes people uneasy about it. It makes me uneasy about it. Maybe if I had dinner with him, I would feel differently, but all of America hasn't had dinner with him.
That may be true. That may be true. The thing that really pained me, and we were talking about this earlier and I couldn't remember, thing that really pained me in Marty Ferris's blog this week is that he said what I've been saying for 2 years is that he'd be very happy with a Gore-Obama ticket. I think in many ways, I don't know, Mickey. These are imponderables that we can't answer. I mean, and so personally, I would like to see Al Gore be president, and so would most people with my politics. But I worry very much about Gore's negative ratings, which are in the low 40s, and I worry that the media will be almost as unfair to him as they were in 2000. But Gore is a very strong candidate. He's speaking from a place of strength. He's clearly got the courage of his convictions. That might offset some of these things. With Obama, we have none of the problems that you have with Gore. The media will love him, and he doesn't have this long story. He doesn't have any negatives really with people except for unreconstructed racists. But there's a big question mark about him, and that question mark will either be filled by him and his people or by Karl Rove's people, and none of us can know the answer to that. So either one would be a big gamble, which is why Edwards is kind of a safer choice.
Gore's problem is that when he got in charge of things, i.e. running the recount campaign in Florida, he screwed it up. And he screwed it up in a characteristically, micromanaging, wanting to be the smartest
guy. Yeah, all of us who like Gore are betting on this brand new Al Gore who's been liberated by his loss. If you're talking about the old Al Gore, we never had any affection for him.
I don't know if you want to liberate the real Al Gore. He was a great vice president. I'd rather have an Obama-Gore ticket. Obama to provide the charisma and overview, and Gore to provide the experience.
I'd be for that too. I don't know if Marty would go along with that, but I'd be for that.
Yeah, no, Marty might. But I do want to get you started on Marty. But do we want to start on Marty right now?
Well, have we wrapped up? Do we need to say anything else about 2008?
So let's talk about.
Does Warner have a chance?
I'm sure he has a chance. He seems sort of deadly dull. My guy is Rendell. I don't understand what's so terrible about Rendell. He's from a key state. I'm a sucker for candor. Okay, you don't have to have dinner with Rendell to feel that you're in the presence of a real person. You can watch him on Meet the Press and feel you're in the presence of a real person. He's a complete loose cannon who says exactly what he thinks.
Yeah, no, he's a very good politician.
He's about to win the governorship of a huge key state. He's a Democrat. He has ambitions.
Is he a Catholic?
I think he may be Jewish.
Well, then he can't win.
You think?
Yeah.
That rules out George Allen, too.
Yeah, I feel bad about that.
Okay, well, I've had various people email me about Rendell that he didn't really take on the unions as I think he did, but I don't know.
I once went up to Rendell because I had a woman friend who was working for him in a relatively distant capacity. And I said to him, it was actually someone I was living with, and I said to him, I live with so-and-so, and he stuck his hand out and said, you're a lucky man. And I thought it was a beautiful political move, because I had no idea whether or not he knew who she was or not, But, at that time, I would have felt like Al Gore said, really, who's that? But he did have it was both totally political but sincere feeling, which is how you win these things.
Well, appreciation for women is also one of the complaints against him, I believe.
Uh-huh.
But
I guess we'd want to know more about that.
Sorry?
I guess we'd want to know more about that.
We'd want to know more about any possibilities there that I don't want to I can't discuss because I can't blog about them because I don't have the goods. But you're not boasting that he hit on your girlfriend.
No,
right?
She wasn't there. I'm just saying he made me feel like he was saying something nice about someone when it was quite possible he didn't even know who he was talking about. He was winning my vote.
Right, okay.
It was a deft political move.
Okay. Well, at some point I have to collate all the responses I got and figure out what's wrong with the guy, because he certainly seems more appealing to me than a Mark Warner type. And Edwards I don't understand the Edwards' popularity.
I love Edwards. Edwards is the best politician in a small room I think I've ever seen, including Clinton.
I saw him in a relatively small room. He was pretty good, but in retrospect, he seemed like a wind-up toy.
Well, he was very bad in the campaign, but people are willing to blame that on Kerry, which is what the Edwards people are, that they wouldn't let him talk.
I saw him in the primary in New Hampshire when he was running against Kerry. He was a wind-up toy.
Oh, well, I saw him when he was running against Kerry. I thought he was good. But look, he's got a message to Americans. He's done very, very well with labor, and he's from the South, and he's apologized for his book. He's very well placed.
That's at least 2 or 3 strikes in my book. But,
it's a good thing you represent the tiniest of minorities.
He was too green. He was too green in 2004, and what's he done to make himself less green now?
He's run a very smart campaign. I mean, his big weakness, he's got 2 weaknesses. The one that may be insurmountable is that he looks like he's 32. He used to look like he was 29. Now he looks like he's 32. And that just may make it impossible for him to be elected president. And the other one is foreign policy and national security, which he chaired a commission at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's working on it, but he's still going to be vulnerable on it no matter what.
I like guys who've run things. Rendell's run something. Even Warner's run something. Obama's never run anything except the Harvard Law Review.
We're back to Obama.
Which I guess is not nothing.
Well, are we deciding who should be president or who would be the most effective candidate?
Edwards, no, I tend to like the guy who's for president who I think would do a good job as president.
Yeah, I like the guy.
Call me crazy.
I don't have the luxury of liking the guy who'd be a good president.
I think voters, this is the Howell Raines fallacy of assuming that voters all think like you, but I think voters look at a candidate and sort of figure out who'd be a good president. I mean, maybe they're wrong, but they didn't say, hey, George Bush, we like his positions. They said, George Bush, well, he's run Texas, how bad could he be? He cooperated with Democrats in Texas, they blah, 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 blah.
I think that's true. But the Democrats don't run as dirty campaigns as Republicans do. So you need to run somebody who's really good at defining themselves and fighting back. And I guess Rendell would be all right at that. But aren't we spending a lot of time on somebody who's given no indication at all that they're planning on running?
Well, he's given...
Huh?
He has to win the governorship of Pennsylvania for it. Nobody thinks he hasn't ruled it out. Nobody thinks he's not ambitious enough to run for president.
Yeah, but you can't run for president when you just became governor 15 minutes ago.
Don't be so sure. This is what George Bush did.
No, he served the term, and I guess Edwards, yeah. I guess he could.
I hope the Democrats win this election just so Democrats like you stop this incredible fear of the Republican attack machine and how it's invincible and how everything we do has to be geared to avoiding these incredible destructive attacks that Republicans can inexorably mount.
Well, you have one point very deep down inside there, which is that it's a dumb way to pick a candidate, to pick someone who you think will appeal to people unlike yourself. Because that's what we did with Kerry, and we were completely wrong. We thought, oh, he's a war hero, these yahoos will go for that, and it turned out to be a net negative, because he was a particular kind of war hero, which is actually the kind of war hero that appeared to people like me.
Well, particularly a guy who you think other people will like, who you don't like yourself.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's kind of silly. But the fact is that the culture of running for president in this country is so odd and so intense that it's got very little to do with governing the country or governing the government, and you have to take that into account because. The issues that end up deciding elections, the kind of Willie Horton type issues or the Swift boat type issues, you need somebody. You can't make that mistake again. You'll lose for sure. I mean, that's what Clinton was good at, was fighting back. You think Clinton won because he had this record of standing up to teachers union? I think he won because he wouldn't take any crap, and also because Perot got 19% of the vote.
Right, exactly. I think he won because of welfare reform, not because of the teachers union. And in fact, it's
welfare
a very
reform
solid
the first
record.
time you mean?
Yeah, there's a very solid record of every time he was in trouble, he ran a welfare reform ad, which was a huge sister soldier move, much more important than the teachers' union.
I think the welfare promise was very important in '92. Yeah, I don't think it mattered in '96, but I think it did matter a lot. Yeah, I agree. I didn't used to think that until I read Tom Edsall's book, and then it transformed a lot of my thinking. Made me much more conservative as a political analyst, as opposed to my own politics.
This is Edsall's new book?
No, the one that came out 14 years ago.
Oh, okay.
The new one is a continuation of that book.
Okay. The new one is actually on my bookshelf behind me.
The new one is good, but that one was great.
Okay. I actually have a good transition to one of our other topics.
Okay.
Speaking of people doing things to appeal to people they don't understand, there is this spate of the regular media hiring these Republicans and conservatives to sort of dress themselves up and make them more appeal more to the red states and those people out there. The most recent thing was, I believe, CBS hired Nicole Wallace.
Yeah.
As a consultant who was like a former Bush flag.
Right.
And now she's.
And they're going to have her on the air.
She's actually on the air?
She's going to be on the air.
Huh. I mean, like a Tim Rutten type coming
on
and giving her analysis?
Supposedly they're going to balance that with, I heard someone maybe like Mike McCurry. But I've seen no evidence of that. I've heard rumors of that. But also, if you look at Katie's free speech guests, they made a very strong statement by 9 nights in a row having no one who could be remotely considered progressive, but including Rush Limbaugh, who's not merely a right-winger, but also a lunatic, saying there is no limit to how far we're willing to go. Maybe we won't bring in Ann Coulter, but we'll bring in Rush Limbaugh.
As you know, I think both Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter are very smart people whose voices deserve to be heard.
I think they're very smart people whose voices do not deserve to be heard.
Okay. But if not agreed with. But my point is that there's the only thing worse than the mainstream liberal media is the mainstream liberal media in drag trying to pretend that it's not mainstream and liberal and trying to be conservative. The most painful thing in the world is listening to NPR on like July 4th or 9/11 trying to pretend that it's in sympathy with Reaganite patriotism.
Nikki, where was this mainstream media when Bill Clinton was being impeached? Where was it in Florida when the balance in the presidency was held in that moment? Where was it in the run-up to the war in Iraq? Well, what good is a liberal mainstream media if it takes the right-wing side whenever? Where was it in the election of 2000? It seems to me on all of the key issues, the mainstream media sides with the right-wing Republicans. So you may say that liberal reporters are liberals, but what good does that do anyone?
Well, if you listen to them day after day after day, they're liberals. You're right that they seem to have not come through in the clutch. I mean, they did get temporarily pissed off at Clinton because of his lies about surrounding Monica, and they were way to the right of the American people, who I think, at the time. So I agree with that. And the run-up to the war, they were not anti-war. They were not as anti-war as you would expect. They were cowed. I agree with that. And also half of them, like my editors at Slate, were for the war.
Yeah, but 85% of the reporting was pro-war. I mean, we didn't learn very much after the war that we didn't know before the war. It's just that that's the war. What was focused on was what the administration was saying, rather than the people who were positioned to be critical. But when you refer to the liberal mainstream media, as I say, so what? So most reporters are pro-abortion and pro-gun control. What difference does it make if on the key issues of the day they always side with the right wing?
Well, they don't always side with the right wingers. The whole run-up to the election has been a drumbeat of anti-Bush leaks. If you listen to NBC, there's a report it went out of the Senate committee that signed by 10 Democrats and 2 Republicans or some ratio like that, and Brian Williams announces that even the Republican Senate, this is like the first sentence out of his mouth, is criticizing Bush. I mean, the daily drumbeat of stories has a...
Yeah, but Mickey, he's the worst president in all of American history.
Sorry?
He's the worst president in all of American history. There's got to be some negative reporting about a guy who's screwing up absolutely everything.
Well, I think they've decided he's the worst president in American history, and they want to get rid of him, and they're doing it. So I think I haven't seen them failing to come through for your side in this election, certainly.
Well, for instance, I mean, maybe this is
Bush's bidding right now.
If I were an anti-Bush reporter, I would have played out much stronger the fact that this NIE report, which says that Iraq has made us much less safe, was exactly what the CIA predicted before he went into Iraq. And Bush went in anyway, on the basis of false information that he deliberately misled the country with. Instead, it's like, oh, it's a big surprise that it's turned out this way. But in fact, he did all this knowingly, which is far worse. Particularly if you're one of those people who's, lost a son or a daughter.
I deny that the NIE report hasn't gotten enough attention in the press. The press
it's the
has been
kind of attention.
wildly overdone with the NIE report. The NIE report it's stunningly obvious to everybody that the Iraq War has increased terrorist recruiting and in the short run, made the world less safe for Americans. The Bush argument is that in the long run, democracy in the Middle East is somehow going to turn that around. It's sort of like they're making a big deal out of this bland bureaucratic report that says something that's blindingly obvious.
I agree that it's blindingly obvious, but what is being missed is the fact that the Bush administration went in knowing that this would be the case, and that they misled the country, knowing that this would be the case, because the CIA issued exactly the same report before we went in, exactly the same warning before we went in, and the Bush administration ignored it. And if we had a liberal media, then, or even if we had a media that wasn't sucking up to Bush, that first report would have gotten a lot more attention. It was on the front page of the New York Times, but it was forgotten the next day. And if we had one today that had a little bit of cojones, they would be throwing that in his face, saying, but you were warned about this, and you went ahead and did it anyway, and hey, it turns out you were lying about everything that you said when you went in. I mean, I think this is really, don't get me started, but I think it's one of the worst things any president has ever done.
You don't need a CIA report to tell you that if you invade Iraq, that there's going to be a lot of Islamic anger in the United States.
No, what the original CIA warning said is there is no terrorism directed at the United States by Iraq now, but if you invade them, there will be. And that's exactly what's happening.
The counterpost to that, there's just sort of casual distortions, like there's a Ray Hernandez story in the New York Times today talking about the presidential briefing that warned before 9/11 that Osama was planning some attacks, and it said that the presidential daily briefing warned Bush that bin Laden was going to attack the United States with hijacked aircraft, making it sound like the presidential daily briefing predicted that he was going to crash aircraft into buildings. If you go back and look at the briefing, which I just did, all it says is that, he's going to hijack he might hijack some aircraft to sort of, in the standard old-fashioned way of demanding ransom, demanding the release of prisoners or something like that.
Well,
the New York
thing
Times
is that
makes it seem like that Bush just ignored this obvious glowing red warning sign.
Well, he did say after he got that briefing, okay, you've covered your ass. And then he went fishing that day, August 6th, 2001. But that's actually less important than the overall thrust of the administration during that period. Nobody really knows. It's unfair to say that if you took all that information that was available to the FBI and the CIA and the various agencies all over the country, and the NSA and the NSC, that we could have prevented the attacks. But all the information was there in the system. And if you had an administration that was focused obsessively on bin Laden, the way I think the Clinton administration was at the end, then I think there was a very good chance you could have stopped it. But it's a fact that the Bush administration didn't care at all about terrorism until 9/11. They only were interested in Star Wars.
Well, here's the point, and this is why Clinton's appearance might be misguided. Bush and the Republicans aren't running on the basis of their pre-9/11 behavior. They're running on the basis of their post-9/11 behavior. Let's concede. I think everybody knows that they dropped the ball before 9/11, and Clinton, in retrospect, dropped the ball a bit, and everybody underestimated bin Laden. Let's wipe that slate clean and forget about that. Everybody screwed up. What do you do after it? And it's right to hold Bush accountable for the Iraq War if it's made things worse. That happened after 9/11. But Clinton is sort of wrong to focus on the pre-9/11 period because, I think the American people say, okay, you both screwed up.
Yeah, that's his personal obsession, his place in history. You get him started on that, he can't stop. But
Right.
I still think it was a net plus for the Democrats for Clinton to do that because people like to see people fighting back.
But so, what's your beef with CBS hiring Nicole Wallace? I mean, so what?
Well,
I mean, it's just going to make the news unwatchable because it's going to be liberals trying to pretend Republicans.
I'm not going to watch it anyway.
Pretend they're Republican.
No, I think that all of these networks and cable networks have decided that liberals don't watch the news. They don't watch television. They only get their news from NPR, which is not all that liberal anyway, but that's where they want the news. And so they think the entire audience is, like Fox's audience, which is 71-year-old males who need, various forms of medicine and hemorrhoid stuff for advertising. And they're all going after the same tiny piece of the pie. And none of them are they're all narrowcasting on behalf of Fox's audience. And maybe they're right, I don't know. But it's annoying. And it's not, and it has a long-term effect because all of these, I don't even tell you, it's the mainstream media, they like to be a little bit different, but not very different. The herd mentality is enormously strong. So when you see this conservative ideology reinforced in one place, it shows up in another place, and then in another place, and then another place. And it's a vicious cycle. So the fact that CBS treated Dan Rather so shabbily, and then got rid of him early, and then picked Katie, who doesn't have a history of being a right-winger, but then they send a signal with only having right-wingers being invited to give commentaries for the first 9 days, including Rush Limbaugh, and then hiring a right-winger out of the box.
That's because they know they've given a left-winger the top job, and so they're trying to compensate by having right-wingers give her a blessing in the first 9 days. Trust me, it's not going to be right-wingers all the way down.
How does one define Katie Couric as a left-winger? I mean, I think it seems to be if you're not a right-winger, you're a left-winger, but she just doesn't have any politics.
She's a gushing, bleeding heart. That puts her on the left in my...
I don't see it. I don't see any
evidence. Her whole affect is...
That's her whole affect, yeah. Because because she's like involved in the world of reality, rather than in the world of faith, and that makes her somehow left-wing.
No, it's because she's in the world of TV, and they like to tell gripping stories about victims and emotions.
Fine.
Which plays into the hands of the left.
But that's not that useful a form of left-wingedness, in my opinion.
I agree it's not useful, but it is still. It's
in other words, it's not something anybody really needs to worry about. It's not nearly as effective as Fox News.
No. Well, what do you think of Keith Olbermann's tack? He's not doing what you say the mainstream press is. He is trying to carve out a niche that is the anti-Fox.
Yeah. Well, he's taking up that space that liberals have always said was there. And he seems to be doing very well for MSNBC in terms of his demographics.
The key is for MSNBC.
What? Yeah.
The key is
but the numbers are growing. He's the only show. He's got the only show there that's growing. And
no, I agree. He's doing well, and it's interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, and he's pretty smart. I actually, when I was a freshman in college, I replaced him in the Cornell Radio Guild. But he's pretty smart. He's a little bit full of himself, I think. He talks as if he thinks he's Churchill sometimes.
That would be my complaint against the guy.
Yeah, but it's a snappy, entertaining show. He's an entertainer first, having come from ESPN and so forth. And so he's actually a pretty good experiment to see if there is an audience on the liberal side. Because he's a fighting liberal, and that's what... Phil Donahue, when Phil Donahue was canceled, it was in part political, but it was also a terrible show. So Keith's show apparently is not so terrible. I've never really actually seen it, but apparently it's not so terrible. Apparently it's pretty good. So it will test this idea of whether or not there's a liberal audience, and maybe there'll be some copycat effect there.
I enjoy it except for the full of himself factor, which I don't like. Okay, well, I think we're close to being time to move to the final topic, which isn't really a topic ripped from the day's headlines, I don't think. Although you correct me if I'm wrong, but you're one of the few journalists who's written a lot about the Jewish lobby and has been willing to take it on. I sort of dabbled in that, so I thought if we talked about it for 5 minutes, we would get both of ourselves fired, and then people wouldn't have to watch us anymore.
You mean we get fired from here? Because I was thinking I've gotten fired from all the places I can get fired for saying anything about the Jewish lobby. I mean, they could turn me away at synagogue on this weekend. But.
You think Center for American Progress is impervious? Okay.
We'll see.
My experience has been that first, it's not, there have been attacks on the influence of the Jewish lobby, like the infamous or famous Mearsheimer-Walt paper. And if you attack the Jewish lobby, you're being both inaccurate and you get yourself in a bit of trouble. If you attack, because in fact, the majority of American Jews do not sympathize with AIPAC, as far as I can see, and the conservative lobbyists who dominate the lobbies in Washington. If you talk about the Likudnik lobby, you get accused of anti-Semitism, but it doesn't stick. David Brooks came at me for that and then backed off. David Frum did and then backed off. It's not a charge that holds any water, so the standard sort of intimidation of critics as anti-Semites doesn't work.
Well, I think it works in some places, it doesn't work in others. It works on some people, it doesn't work on others. You have to be very specific. I mean, I was called a self-hating Jew by Kathy Young, who writes a column in the Boston Globe for something I wrote. It had to do actually with an item Andy Sullivan wrote, and then I wrote about that. I thought it was a bit much to ask the Muslim Council of England to participate in a Holocaust Remembrance Day activity. I just thought it was kind of bad manners. And then I was accused by Kathy Young in the Boston Globe of blaming the Holocaust victims for Palestinian misery. Now, nobody in the Boston Globe knows anything, who reads the Boston Globe. Most of those people have never heard of me, and they don't really know all that much about Kathy Young. So it was a very effective slur, and I had to spend an awful lot of energy fighting it, because a lot of people would just say, oh, he's an anti-Semite, to the degree that they would ever remember my name. And that's all you have to do. And whenever you say anything critical about the Israel lobby, there will be people who will say that. And it's who needs that kind of trouble? So it's still very effective. Now, it's true that people who are watching this video and people who read blogs and are really involved, they know that what David Brooks said and what David Frum said about you is inaccurate and unimportant. But there's a whole strata of people who, when they read that in the New York Times, that's all they're ever going to see about it, and they're just going to, that's all they need to know. So I still think it's enormously effective for people who care about this accusation, as I do. And one really does pay a price for it.
There's a difference between being accused of an anti-Semite and being accused of being a self-hating Jew. I mean, most of the Jews I know have at least some percentage of if not self-hatred, self-distaste.
Well, as Woody Allen says, I hate myself, but it's got nothing to do with being Jewish.
And it's not the worst thing in the world to be accused of being a self-hating Jew. If you go to synagogue, you're way ahead of me, buddy.
Now, my larger point is that it is an accusation with considerable effectiveness. It's not effective everywhere, and it, of course, depends who makes it. But it's a very powerful thing, and it does prevent an awful lot of scrutiny of AIPAC to this day, even though every time you use it, it loses a little bit of its effect. I mean, Walt and Mearsheimer, I think they wrote a surprisingly sloppy paper. I'm sort of friends with Walt, and I've always had enormous respect for Mearsheimer's political science. And I was almost ready to endorse the paper before I read it. Like I said, finally, the paper's here on my blog. And then I read it and I said, uh-oh, there's a lot of problems with this paper.
What are the problems with it? Because I know some of them, but I don't people I respect say that there are a lot of problems with it. But in what way is it sort of clumsy and...
Well, the main intellectual problem with it is that it doesn't distinguish between the differences within what it calls the Jewish lobby, or the Israel lobby. In other words, it doesn't really distinguish between the hardline, never criticize Israel, whatever they do is right position of Abe Rosenthal and Norman Part Horitz, and to a slightly lesser degree Marty Peretz, and people who someone like Richard Cohen, who will criticize Israel, but will in the end come down, cares about Israel, but will criticize Israel because he cares about Israel. In other words, there's people who will never who think Israel's always right. I presume there's some people who just think that. Then there's people, which is an awful lot of American Jews, who take the position that even if I think Israel's wrong, I'm not going to criticize it because their bodies are on the line and mine isn't, and there was a Holocaust, and it's just too dangerous, and it's my job to support it. Then there's people who's like Tony Lewis used to be the sort of the ne plus ultra of this, and saying, I'm helping Israel by criticizing them because they're doing a terrible thing, and they're digging their own grave, and it's friends like me that will help them see the light. And then there's, people who just say, what the hell? What's good for the United States? Israel's not my problem any more than the Arabs are not my problem. And they didn't make many distinguishments. They didn't distinguish very well between categories 1, 2, and 3. There was only that category and the people who are the strict realist analysis, as they themselves thought they were.
That makes more sense. I read a blog post on TPM Cafe which took them to task for failing to distinguish between Wolfowitz and Feig. And I thought that was cutting it pretty fine.
Yeah, that's a little bit much for me. Although Feig is worse than Wolfowitz.
There are obviously important distinctions between Wolfowitz and Feig, but it seems to me you can still love them.
No, but you got to give Wolfowitz a little bit of credit on this point for going to an Israel rally and talking about the suffering of the Palestinians and getting booed for it. Now,
well, and he was the one who always said after the Iraq War, then we can crack down on Israel and make peace with the Palestinians. And that happened for like 2 months, and then it was all over.
So I guess maybe we have a disagreement here, which is good. I do think that that's a distinction worth making between Wolfowitz.
Okay, no, you've convinced me. I'm supposed to be on the other side of this.
Yeah.
Let me try to be. Marty Peretz, in my experience, is not what you say. He is somewhere between Anthony Lewis and your category 3 of people who say in their minds that what's good for Israel is good for the United States. But he's quite willing to criticize Israel. He's criticized. I remember him criticizing Menachem Begin on quite strong terms. I assume he's one of the people who told Israel that they have to stuff it about Jonathan Pollard. So I guess I would dispute that characterization.
No, I would say that Marty is one of the strongest forces in America for shutting down any criticism of Israel, unless Leon has talked about it first. In other words, anyone who criticizes Israel is ipso facto a bad person and shouldn't be trusted, unless it for some reason happens to coincide with something Marty happens to believe, which is quite rare. I mean, he really sees himself as an enforcer. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know Marty personally that well, but I wouldn't be surprised if he actually thought of himself, of his life, as that being his purpose in life, to protect Israel by undercutting its critics. And yes, there are certain kinds of criticism that are allowed in that context. And Leon is more effective than anybody in America, I would say, at making it. But when you look at, it was Marty and Alan Dershowitz were the first two people to level the anti-Semitism attack on Mearsheimer and Wall. And there's just no evidence for that at all. Like I said, it's intellectually sloppy. I could give you a few other examples where I think it surprised me with the sloppiness. But there isn't a single shred of evidence that anti-Semitism is the proper way to view those mistakes. And yet that's exactly where he went. And once you say anti-Semitism, you don't have to have a conversation.
I just don't think that you vastly overestimate the power of the New Republic. It's a dwindling.
Not among Jews, I don't.
Well, but you don't shut people up by convincing Jews that they should be shut up. But there's the rest of America. I think Marty Peretz would like to shut you up.
Yeah.
But I don't think.
I have in my files. This is not quite a lot, but I have in my files. I could have pulled it out. I have a letter that I received in 1985 from Marty Peretz congratulating me on my sensitive writings on the problem of anti-Semitism and inviting me to become a contributor to the New Republic.
That is one for the Smithsonian. But
just in case he ever gets the notion to actually do anything to actually hurt me, I'll pull it out.
I just, I was at the New Republic for years. I made it through by not really knowing a hell of a lot about the Middle East, in ignorance I studiously cultivated. But I did observe, and the idea that Marty is as an enforcer in his relation and what he writes in the relation to the outside world just doesn't jive with what I saw going on.
Now, you may be right and I may be wrong. As someone in the outside world, that's exactly how I view it.
There was a second meeting after.
I mean, Podhoretz does it not nearly as... Podhoretz does it, but he's not as credible a voice because it's commentary, not the New Republic.
See, I see Marty as sort of a tribal leader. He says what he thinks. You never have to worry that Marty's mad at you, because if he's mad at you, you'll know about it. That's why I think it's so great that he has a blog, because he will say exactly what he thinks, and you can take it or leave it. And he doesn't have any particular huge power as a blogger, but he is a powerful writer with, strong and bitter feelings, and that makes for a good blog. There was a second meeting after the regular editorial meeting, and maybe that meeting was a conspiratorially forcing meeting. But the ones I went to...
Well, no, you wouldn't do that in an editorial meeting. You'd do it, over drinks with Leon. You'd say, this has to be done. Who's going to do it? You don't do that kind of thing in public.
It's possible. My impression is that Marty, he also has a sort of academic sensibility, which is a tolerant, let's have a big intellectual fight sensibility.
The weirdest thing about Marty, I know so many people who just think Marty's the greatest guy in the world. And my friend Rick Hertzberg swears by him. And every single piece of evidence aside from that, I think he's a harsher. But I take this seriously, that he has this side that he reveals privately. That is wonderful, but I think Marty is one of the people most responsible
my experience
for
with him was very positive.
American liberalism.
Sorry?
I think Marty's tenure at the New Republic has been a horrible chapter for American liberalism. I think it's done terrible things to it. And I think that he uses that magazine in a completely corrupt fashion to attack his enemies and defend his friends in a way that can't be defended except on the basis of his own.
But you're saying that the whole Kinsley era, which Marty sponsored, was terrible for American liberalism?
What?
You're saying that the whole Kinsley era during Carter and Reagan was bad for American liberalism? That was all under Marty. That was Marty's doing.
Yeah, but he legitimized Reagan and Gene Kirkpatrick and things like now Lawrence Kaplan as the quote-unquote liberal, even the New Republic. We don't need to rehearse that whole thing. What I like about Marty's blog is that it reveals this mentality that I've been interpreting in criminological fashion for the past 25 years, in its raw form. And I agree it makes for compelling reading, although I recoil in horror sometimes, but I find that useful.
Well,
it's compelling the same way Lee Siegel was compelling, He's very smart, he's very well educated, but it's nuts.
Well, I don't think he makes a fool of himself the way Lee Siegel makes a fool of himself. My experience with Marty, and I should just say this, is it was nothing to do with foreign policy. It had to do with welfare in the underclass. He was one of the first to write about it. He was very supportive of what I wrote. He was responsible for the magazine coming out in favor of welfare reform, and he has whatever he did.
Well, he was also responsible for the magazine endorsing Charles Murray, which I think is a lot closer to his heart.
I think that was Andrew's doing.
Well, Andrew and Marty. Marty wrote that piece in that famous issue.
But I think Andrew was the motive force behind that. I could be wrong.
No, but I'm saying if you support... Charles Murray was a complete corruption of welfare reform. In other words, I think Marty's support for welfare reform is more about stop giving these lazy blacks a free ride than it was about having a more effective, public sector the way you argue.
That's unfair. He has Marty's wife works with troubled families in the ghetto, and he has...
If Marty's wife were the head of the New Republic, I wouldn't have so many problems with it.
But through her, he has a fairly intense and accurate understanding.
Well, a friend of mine who interviewed for the job, when he hired, or maybe when he hired Chuck, I forget who got the job then, said that all Marty wanted to talk about was affirmative action and how important it was that the magazine come out against affirmative action. and it made my friend doing the job very uncomfortable.
Well, I'm against affirmative action, so I can hardly give.
Yeah, I know, but there are ways to be. I have problems with affirmative action myself, but there are ways to be against it. And when a liberal magazine is obsessively against it, it's questionable as its value of a liberal magazine.
You're doing the same thing that people do to critics of the Iraq War. You're attacking them for being right and for being obsessed about being right. Well, if they're right, they're right.
Well, it depends. I don't remember. I don't have on the tip of my tongue exactly. I'm telling you that my friend felt like he was being interviewed by a racist. That's all.
Well, I wonder if our viewers are interested in the New Republic internal, not gossip, but discussions like. We'll find out.
Wrap it up. My clock here says 1 hour and 41 seconds.
No, I think it is time to wrap it up. That was my wrapping it up.
Okay, good.
That was my clumsy wrapping it up speech. But we'll find out. Anyway, well, we've agreed too much, as I suspected.
I won't be so nice next time. It's my first time.
Next time, we really have to raise the venom level, I think.
Okay.
We're following David Corn and Byron York, so this is going to seem like a love-in. But what the hell?
If in fact my mic got turned on.
Okay, well let's hope.
Okay.
Okay, see you. Thanks.